Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and it's time for another Brewer's Minute. And we got a really interesting topic this week. This week, we're kind of going meta in looking at deck building theory. And when it comes to building decks, there are two main types of deck design. You can have top-down deck design or bottom-up deck design. And today we're going to talk about the difference between these two ways of building decks and how the way that you choose to build your deck will have an impact on your final product. So a quick reminder before we break it down, if you enjoy Brewer's Minute, take a minute and click the subscribe button down in the bottom of your screen. It's a great way you can support the channel and the site for free. So let's talk top down or bottom up. So interestingly, building a deck is a lot like making magic cards. Wizards talks about this, Marrow talks about this, how some cards are top down designs and some cards are bottom up designs. So Colossus of Akros is a good example of a top-down design. So Wizards wanted to have a Colossus, so they start with this idea of we're going to build a Colossus, and then they think, well, how do we make a Colossus into a magic card? It has Defender, it's indestructible, it's huge, so you work down, and the abilities and the text on the card is all influenced by your starting point of wanting to make a Colossus. On the other hand, magic cards are also built from the bottom up. So Fiery Temper, I would assume, started with, we need a Madness Burn spell. So how do we make a Madness Burn spell? It has Madness for 1, it costs 3, it's like Lightning Bolt. I guess we can name it Fiery Temper, that's a fine burn spell name, put some art with fire on it. So you're starting with what the card does, deal 3 damage to a creature or player, and then the name and the art and all that stuff comes afterwards. So building decks are the same way. As far as building from the top down, a good example of this is our Temur Summonings deck. So the way I built this deck is I started with Metallurgic Summonings, and I said, well, I want to build around this card. I really like this card. And then I thought, well, what do I want to put around it? So Metallurgic Summonings is at the top of the pyramid, and then underneath Metallurgic Summonings are the cards that I really wanted to play with it. Nissa's Renewal, Part the Water Veil. So these are kind of the second level of cards that are in support of Metallurgic Summonings. They're not as important as Metallurgic Summonings to the deck, but they're still key pieces to the deck and kind of the next cards I got to when building the deck. And then after that, we get down to the bottom of the pyramid, and we have the support cards that make the deck work. Natural Connections, Cultivator's Caravan allow the deck to ramp into its key pieces. Cathartic Reunion, Tormenting Voice help find the key pieces. And then we got some removal in Radiant Flames and Harness Lightning. So we start at the top of the pyramid with Metallurgic Summonings, and then we work our way down to kind of the key support cards, and this is Renewal and Part the Water Veil, and then at the bottom of the pyramid we have this big group of the other stuff in the deck. So we start at the top and worked our way down. On the other hand, decks are often built in the opposite direction too. A good example of this would be Merfolk. So let's say you're looking to build a Merfolk deck. You're likely to start by typing Merfolk into some sort of search engine, into Magic Online, into Gather, or something like that. You find a bunch of Merfolk, you recognize that the Lords are one of the big reasons to play Merfolk. You get a ton of Lords, they're cheap, they're powerful, so you have this huge base at the bottom of your pyramid of Merfolk Lords, and then you kind of work up the chain, and you're like, well, what works with Merfolk Lords? Other Merfolk, obviously, so you look for the best support Merfolk. So the next level up the pyramid is Curse Catchers and Silvergill's Adept and Harbinger of Tides and Master of Waves. So you're kind of working in that direction. Then you're like, we should probably have some removal. So you toss that in, maybe some ways to protect our Merfolk and Kira and Spell Pierce. And then at the very top of the pyramid, you have Spreading Seas. So the way you would build Merfolk would be the direct opposite of how you would build Metallurgic Summonings. You would start with this wide base at the bottom and then work your way up the pyramid to the support cards, your removal spells, and then finally Spreading Seas at the very top. The most interesting part about the top-down or bottom-up debate is how big of an impact it actually has on your deck building. So, for example, if you're going to try to build Merfolk, the way you built Metallurgic Summonings, you'd be starting with Spreading Seas at the top of your pyramid, and you're very unlikely to end up with Merfolk. When you read Spreading Seas, you don't think, wow, I should probably play Merfolk Lords. You think, well, I can mess with my opponent's land, I draw a card, maybe a control deck. It could have something to do with like Boil or Choke or things that mess with islands. So if you started with Spreading Seas and built top down, you're unlikely to end up at Merfolk Tribal. Similarly, if you started with the Metallurgic Summonings deck, and you built from the bottom up, and you had your Cathartic Reunions, your Cultivators Caravans, your Radiant Flames, who knows where you would end up? You could be a Dredge deck discarding stuff to Radiant Flames. You could be a Vehicles deck looking to suit up your Cultivators Caravan, or some sort of control deck using your Radiant Flames, but you're unlikely to start at the bottom of the Metallurgic Summonings pyramid and work your way up to Metallurgic Summonings. That's pretty unlikely. So the path that you take when you start building a deck is going to have a major, huge impact. It's not that there's a right or wrong way in doing this. Building from top down is fine. Building from bottom up is fine. So when you sit down to build your next deck, take a quick second and think, what direction am I heading? Am I heading from the bottom up with this wide base? Or am I heading from the top down from a specific card or synergy and then filling in the gaps around it? So if you can train yourself to think that way when you sit down to build a deck, you're going to have a lot more success because you don't want to get stuck flailing in the middle. Anyway, that's been our Brewers Minute for this week. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will talk to you soon.